Welcome to In All Honesty, the podcast where we get real about life and all the problems that come with it. I'm Michelle Elman, and I'm that friend who we all know is a little bit too honest. You might not come to me when you get back together with your ex, but I'll be there for you when it all goes tits up. Welcome back to In All Honesty, and today's co-host is Millie Gooch, who I am obsessed with. I don't even remember how we met.
No, I think the first time I met you in person was Ellie Mid's book launch. But I'd known about you a long time before.
So I went to a book launch where I knew no one. I was not in the mood to socialise. And then I found Millie in the corner, who was actually so comforting to me because I was having one of those days where I really just did not want to talk. Yeah. And you just made it so easy to have a conversation that day. And then also what we were talking about was fascinating because I didn't know anything about you.
Yeah.
And that you talk about being sober and you talk about drinking less and all of these conversations. So she is an amazing author of the Sober Girl Society Handbook and Booze Less.
Yeah.
And she's also the founder of the Sober Girl Society.
Oh, that's a great introduction. Thank you.
I really wanted to talk to you about it because especially this time of year, everyone's trying to drink less.
Yeah.
There's dry January going on. But also my relationship with alcohol has changed a lot. So I would just love to know how you got into all of this.
Yeah. So I started drinking really when I was like 18. I went to uni. I wasn't really a big drinker before that. And when I went to uni, I got a job in nightclubs, bars, like 3 different jobs to get myself through uni. And basically went from a nothing drinker to like a 3-4 night a week binge drinker, became like the ultimate party girl. It kind of coincided with like the era of Geordie Shore.
That's the same as me. I had my first drink at 18 and then went to uni, drank probably 5 nights a week.
Yeah, I think in a way it's like I had no kind of like learning of it before. So I just went into this kind of, like binge drinking culture, which you don't feel like you have a choice with uni. It's feel like that is the culture and that's how you make friends. And then after uni, a lot of my friends started slowing down and I just sort of sped up and I went to work in PR and then I went to work in journalism and my drinking just slowly and steadily got more and more out of control.
If you had to look back, was the increase in drinking because they are such high pressure jobs?
Yeah.
Or was it a keeping up with the people around you who are also drinking a lot?
I think it was a mix. I don't necessarily think I drank because of the job, but it enabled me to drink more because I was going to a lot of different events that, you would just get plied with champagne. And I was working as an intern at a PR company once, and one of their, they had a free Friday bar, and this was the time when people didn't have to pay their interns. So on a Friday, they used to basically pay us in free drink.
And there's such a mentality in your 20s of like, if something's free, take advantage of it.
Yeah. And when you're a junior as well in your career, you want to like impress the people. And Friday night was like the chance that you might get to like speak to the person who was, hiring on like another level and things like that. So I think it really enabled and encouraged it. But I don't think it was necessarily the reason why I drank.
Do you think it's also the social lubricant aspect of like it's easier to hold a conversation, especially in PR where like there's a lot of like small talk, schmoozy conversations that like you can have a bit more of a personality, and it's not actually the personality coming from booze, but actually because your inhibitions are being lowered.
Yeah, I think because for most of my, like younger years, I'd had the friends that I'd had at school. I'd never had to like meet new people. And so sort of, especially after uni for the first time in my life, I was meeting people that I had nothing in common with. And the whole point of PR is to like, make connections and make relationships. And I was really struggling to, speak to people that I had nothing in common with. And for a lot of people, booze is that like thing that you both have in common.
Yeah.
So it is like a good sort of like bridging the gap kind of thing. So I think that was an encouragement because I also for the first time realised that I wasn't great in social situations.
Yeah.
I'd been so used to hanging out with my friends and being fine with them, but I wasn't actually great in new situations. I think that's what I realised.
It's funny because also in university, you said you really learned like the drinking culture in uni, but you grew up here and I didn't. Yeah. And what I also realised, I grew up in Hong Kong. And so what I realised by moving here, and especially in university, is realising, and it was more so in dating actually, that I recognised that whilst we learn the drinking culture in university, there are also people who learn the drinking culture in their families. Like they have a pub culture family.
Yeah.
And I dated someone for quite a while who had a very strong pub culture. Like Friday night, we were in the pub.
Yeah.
And it was very ingrained in how they socialized. It was very ingrained in how you were perceived in the family as well. And I think for me, I found it a little bit jarring because of the Hong Kong element where like when we go out for dinner in Hong Kong, like people don't automatically drink, for example.
Yeah.
Whereas it wasn't just the pub culture, it was the one glass of white wine at the end of every night. When you go out for a meal, you order a drink alongside your meal. All of these things that were like customary or part of the culture here, I found like really intense because it wasn't just that's the culture. It was that you were pressured to join in on the culture.
Yeah. Almost here as well, like a reflection on you if you don't
drink.
On coolness. I even think with like the UK in particular, I said like I felt when I stopped drinking that people assumed that I wasn't patriotic. You know, like around things like, like the World Cup, like you're not drinking, that they equate that with you like not celebrating the country. And it's such a like,
well, God forbid you don't
thing.
Actually want to go to the pub.
Exactly.
like and you find the pub a bit boring.
Yeah. But it's such a boozy Brit thing. And like that's the label that we have, that it's almost like, well, if you don't drink, like, are you even really British? And I find we have a lot of girls that come to our meetups as well that are from like Ireland or Scotland, and they get the pressure even more as well, because they're like, well, everyone can't understand why an Irish girl doesn't drink. Like it's quite ingrained, I think, in the UK.
Wow. I think where our journeys differ and what ended up being a bit of my saving grace was, so I went heavy into like drinking 5 nights a week. I had age on my side because I remember things like I used to go to bed at like 2 a.m, wake up at 7, go to the gym, go back home at 9 and then go back asleep. Like, and then I missed all my lectures. I didn't go to a lot of lectures in first year of university. But what happened at the end of the first term was I got glandular fever, which meant I couldn't drink. And so I came back to the second term in first year. And first year is like really that freshers vibe of being like, I have 2 choices. One, I stay at home and like don't go out with my friends, but then I'm going to ostracize myself. Or I go, but I go sober.
Yeah.
And I remember the first night I went out and realized the walls are red.
Yeah.
I had never noticed the club walls are red. The floors are sticky. And God, the club stank.
Oh
like
my God.
I did not notice any of that because I had been drinking so heavily up to that point. And then there was an epiphany, and I wasn't a very confident 18-year-old, but there was something about the fact that I realized, oh, it doesn't matter if you are drunk because everyone else is. They don't remember what you do either. And so it's this thing of like, alcohol lowers inhibitions, but actually my inhibitions were so lowered too by realizing no one remembered anything, that I could be completely sober. And I joke with my friends a lot, like especially with my uni friends now, that the number of times in university in that first year where I didn't drink for the second or third term, where someone would take away my drink and tell me I've had enough, and then I'd be like, have a sip, and they'd be like, what? You're just drinking Coke? They were like, and I'd be like, yeah, that's my personality.
Yeah, that's just me.
That's just me. But it gave me this confidence. And then in second year, in the second term, I ended up going into hospital again. So I actually couldn't drink most of second year. But I think it taught me that I didn't need alcohol to be fun. Or even that it wasn't noticeable. And to other people, because I am a big personality, like I had this sense of liberation. It wasn't just being a big personality or being outgoing. It was the fact that I was so conscious of the fact that no one remembers anything when they drink. And so I almost gave myself the permission to be that free too. But I think that's one of the concerns, that when I was dating a guy who was very focused on like drinking and alcohol and pub culture and all of these things, he would be like, but how do you have the confidence to go in a room and be fun? And I was like, I learned it in uni. And then it carried on into adulthood.
That's such a great lesson to learn early on. It took me much longer to learn that lesson.
But why do we think we associate the fun is coming from the alcohol?
It's hard, but I think it's just so tied up in everything we do. Like, we have it at, christenings, funerals, weddings, we raise toasts. Like, it is absolutely everywhere. You can't escape it. And it is, honestly, my number one trolling comment is people saying, I bet you're fun at parties. Whenever I post anything, you're boring, I bet you're fun at parties. Like, it is literally, I don't even think people really process it. It's just this narrative. It's like the same thing where people go, oh, you shouldn't trust people who don't drink. And I'm like, why?
So what? People say that?
Yeah, you never heard that.
No.
People always say, oh God, never trust someone who doesn't drink.
What's the thinking behind it?
There is no rational thinking. It's literally just a saying that people say. Because I'm like, listen, when I was drinking, you should not have trusted me. I lost everything. I was like flirting with people's boyfriends, like all the things that you wouldn't trust someone to do.
Your morals went out the window.
Morals went out the window. Now I'm so trustworthy. If you give me something to look after on a night out, that is coming home. Like,
see, I have a limit on dates that I can only have 2 drinks because I started making decisions that I actually wasn't aligned with anymore. But also the boring thing only really started happening. It wasn't an insecurity, as I said, because I was always being very confident that I'd be fun. But I started dating a guy who was big pub culture, and he started saying things like, oh, well, I feel pressure to not drink when you don't drink. And I was like, honestly, I'm not even noticing whether you've drank or not. I don't care how many drinks you've ordered, all of these things. But as a result, I remember, this is not healthy. I probably shouldn't be admitting to it. But I remember he just kept asking me, kept wanting. And I used to joke. I was like, oh, you should have met me in uni. In uni, I used to drink a lot. I just don't actually like the taste of alcohol.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy for me to not drink. And then what helped that was during the pandemic, I did all 3 lockdowns completely alone. And I'm very aware of the depressant effect that alcohol has. And as I've got older, my hangovers have got really bad. They started getting really bad at 23, where like now when I drink, I've recorded this podcast on a 5-day hangover before, where like I literally only had like 4 drinks. And then 5 days later, I was still feeling rubbish.
Oh, doesn't it?
And I think it's because of the Asian thing. Like, I don't have the enzyme to metabolize it and all of those things.
Do you get flushing?
I don't get flushing, but I do get a really bad hangover. It lingers for a really long time. And so in the pandemic, I just stopped drinking. And then I got COVID 6 times. And it changed my taste buds for the 2 things that I liked drinking, which was gin and tonic and white wine. And it actually took me so long to realize I didn't like white wine because I'm fussy and picky with white wine anyway.
Wow.
So I kept ordering it, having one sip and then being like, no, I don't like this one. And I just thought it was that one. And then it was like the 4th time I'd done it and I went, wait, I think my taste bud for wine has changed.
Yeah.
And so basically my taste buds had changed for alcohol. So I didn't really drink for most of the last 2 years. And so what ended up happening was my ex kept making comments on it. And so one night I was like, fine, I'm going to drink. I'm going to get fucked tonight. And then you are going to have to look after me.
Yeah.
And I went to this house party, had the best time, paid for it like a whole week after. Woke up the next morning, he was like, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Why are you proud? And again, it's this pub culture drinking thing that he was like, no, but you actually had fun last night. You actually let yourself go. And
I hate the like, let yourself go, let your hair down mentality. That's
right. And I was like, I don't need to drink to let myself go, first of all. I have had fun in the past.
Yeah.
And just because in your perception, I was either being sillier, or goofier, or messier, frankly, because I also was not more fun. I fell asleep in the corner of the room for the party.
It's not
so
fun.
It was not more fun by any means. But the fact that like it was the one time I did that in our 3-year relationship, it was the one time I did that in an entire decade, maybe 2. I don't ever remember falling asleep in a party before that.
Yeah.
And that was being labeled as more fun. I was like, that's 100%. And I spoke to him about it and we had a very serious conversation at the time because I said, you do know all of these things you say to me about alcohol, about your relationship with alcohol?
Yeah.
And how do you teach someone like that funness and alcohol are not equated?
It's really hard, I think, to teach people any lessons about alcohol that they don't want to hear. I think that the way I found is like modeling it and like people will see that then I have a fun night out without drinking and it just tweaks something in their brain that goes, oh, she had a good night out and she's woken up the next morning and she's joyful and she's sprightly.
Chirpier than the rest
and
of
it
us.
just, plants a little seed. And then I think once you keep going, like all my friends now, even though most of them still drink, they're so aware that you do not need alcohol to have fun. Like, and they've seen that in what I've shown them over the past 7 years. But I don't think you can change anyone's opinion.
For yourself, how did you realize you could be fun without alcohol? Like, what are the first steps?
I think it took a while to actually realize that I could. And I think a lot of it was working out what I actually like doing for fun. Because like when I was drinking, I would have done absolutely anything. Like you could have put me in like warehouse project with like drum and bass on for 8 hours and I would have had the time of my life. When I got sober, I was like, I actually don't like drum and bass music.
Gives me a headache.
You know, and I don't want to be in a dingy club where I can't hear my friends speak. So I started being like, actually, what happens if we go whitewater rafting? Or like what? And I just started doing like other things and started learning. And I did some things and I was like, actually not for me. And I did other things. And it was a trial and error finding like, what do I find fun apart from going out and getting shit-faced every single weekend?
So do you think it's a numbing thing, a numbing agent as well, that like when you're doing things that don't make me feel comfortable, doesn't actually bring you joy, that it's your way of finding joy in them by just disassociating essentially?
Yeah, I think like I always say the main difference for me now is like a fun, I can know when a party is actually fun now, because if I enjoy it, like I go to a party and I have fun and I'm like, that was a fun party.
Yeah.
If I was drinking, I could have made a shit party fun.
Yeah.
So it is a numbing thing of the things that I wasn't enjoying, but I just didn't ever like give myself a chance. But I think also I realised I was like quite socially awkward. I didn't like being in really like overly stimulating environments. I didn't like really loud noises and really busy clubs. So I would drink to get through those elements. So to numb the kind of sensory element of it as well, I think.
Because they are overstimulating, overwhelming.
Flashing lights, lots of people, you can't hear your friends, you're queuing for the bar, you're getting squashed. I'd be like, oh, it's fine, I'll have a load of shots. And then I was on the same level as everyone else.
And did you go from drinking heavily to like cold turkey, nothing overnight?
Yeah, so over like my drinking kind of days, I knew that I didn't gel well with alcohol. And I tried to do like, it was called triathlon back in the day. I don't think they run it anymore, but it's like a month. And then when I was at uni, I gave it up for Lent because it was getting to be an issue. But then the day that I decided that I was going to stop drinking was on like an almighty hangover where I'd like just couldn't remember my night out basically.
Yeah.
Woke up and was like never drinking again. And I mean, I'd said it 4,000 times before that, but this time actually stuck to it. And then, never had a drink since.
I think because there's been so much more of a conversation around it, I think the part that I don't relate to in the conversation, and this is just how different people have different experiences with it, is I never made a cold turkey decision. When people were saying like last year or the year before, like, and I'll just be like, oh, I'll just get a Coke. They'd be like, oh, how long has it been since you've not drunk? And I would have to actually like pull up my calendar because I've never tracked it. I've never actually used labels around it. I have maybe gone as far as to say, oh, I'm not much of a drinker, but that's about it. When someone books a date in a pub, I don't even bother to be like, by the way, I might not end up drinking. Like, it's just genuinely quite intuitive to me of like, if I don't want to drink, I don't drink. If I do, I do. And like, I don't calculate when's the last time I've drank in order to decide that. It's actually how I feel in my body. But I've never heard that anywhere else.
Well, you are the definition of sober curious. I know you don't like a label, but that is what you are, because sober curious is, so a lot of people now think it means being curious about being full-time sober, but Ruby Warrington, who wrote the book, basically put sober curious as a forever state. So something that you will always be, and that is constantly being aware, mindful, or like you said, intuitive about your relationship with alcohol. Constantly being like, do I actually want this drink? Like, how does drinking make me feel? Am I in this situation? Am I drinking to add to it or because I want to numb? That is what sober curious is. It's a default state of just always being very mindful, very aware about your relationship with alcohol.
I guess where I want to rebel against that label, but this is also where I hate labels, is I don't think about it that much.
No, but then that's fine. That's also fine. But her thing is that it's not the main factor in your life. And that is kind of what it is
I
for
think
you.
It's the mentality that I have got to with alcohol of I can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
If one gets thrust in my hand, I would probably rebel against it because I don't like being told what to do. But like, if everyone is having wine and it's at the table, and I'll have a sip of it quite easily and not touch the rest of the glass. Like, it is so boring to me in a sense. It is uninteresting. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to have to decide whether I'm drinking before an event. I'm going to change my mind because I like rebelling against being told what to do. And all of those things. But also the way that it comes up in conversation largely is on dates, because there was an experience in the summer. I went on this spontaneous date. So we had matched at 8:00 and then he was like, why don't we just do something now? And what's funny is I always use the language of let's go for a drink or let's go to the pub. But I don't actually mean drinking. And so he said like, oh, I don't drink. And I was like, oh, I meant like a Coke, anything, like a liquid.
A liquid, something I can put in my mouth.
I was like, But it was the fact that we then spoke about it after, and he was like, no, I feel the need to warn people.
Yeah.
Because if I don't warn them. And then I had a friend 2 weeks ago going on a first date, really liked this guy, and she's not been drinking for like maybe 4 months.
Yeah.
And she was like, do I need to tell him? And I was like, you don't need to. What you choose to drink on your date is your choice. But why do people feel they need to give a disclaimer?
Yeah, it's funny because I think me and you probably do have conflicting advice on this, because for me, like, when I was drinking was my entire personality and everything revolved around drinking. And if someone had said to me, I'm not drinking at the moment, I probably wouldn't have wanted to go on a date with them. And that is the reality. Yeah. So now I always say to girls, just like put it in. I don't make a huge thing of it. I don't put it on my profile. I don't like none of that.
I saw it in someone's profile yesterday.
Yeah. And some people do. And that's fine. But I think it's slightly different now because I think perceptions are changing. But when I was dating like a few years ago, it was quite like a drastic thing to put sober in your profile, because I think people still had those misconceptions about it. And I wanted people to get to know me first, like have a bit of chat, and then I would tell them. So I would just say, when someone would say, do you want to go for a drink? I'd just say, absolutely, just so you know, I don't drink alcohol, but I'll happily have like an alcohol-free beer or something. Just slide it in, because I did at the beginning have people react really negatively to it.
Is it also whether you find it hard if people drink around you, or did you never have that aspect?
Yeah, I think I always tried to look, when I was dating, at profiles of people who probably looked like it wasn't their entire personality. Like you could tell if every single photo was them in a club holding a drink, then I was a bit like, oh, I'm not sure we would be aligned. And it's not about like whether someone drinks or not, but just lifestyle wise. So I would look for people who were like doing active things, getting outside, like traveling, all that kind of thing. Didn't necessarily have a drink in their hand every time. And that, I think, kind of weeded that out. But it was an element of like, if someone's got this idea that we're going to go out and get absolutely hammered, and then I let them down. Not I let them down on that.
Does anyone have that idea on a first date?
I think they do. When I was drinking, I've been on some boozy first dates.
I've never been. Oh, actually, maybe in my 20s. What I'm not okay with is someone not okay with my relationship with alcohol.
Interesting. But would you find it hard if someone did drink a lot and say like, I don't know, Saturday morning, you want to go out and do something and they're really hungover? Because it wasn't necessarily the drinking for me. It was the knock-on effects, like of being, if I was to be with someone who like on a Saturday, I'm like, let's go out and do something fun. They're like, I can't, I'm hungover.
Yeah, that would affect me. I've never really thought about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would impact my day. But I guess whenever I've been with people who drink a lot, they're very get up and go on their hangovers. I've never actually met someone who wasted a hangover. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I was a 5-day in bed hangover kind of person.
I was too, but I don't drink as much as a result, because I hated wasting an entire weekend, because I was just, and to this day, like if I have a heavy night, I will be sat on the sofa the entire day. You cannot move me. I will be miserable. And I know I'm also signing up for being more down. Like I have a very conscious thing in my brain of, if I've drunk a lot, you're not allowed to believe your brain. Yeah. And that holds for 72 hours for me. And it's
you're so self-aware with your relationship with alcohol though. Not everyone is like that. Like
I think it's because I grew up in a family where they had a very conscious relationship with alcohol. I genuinely probably only have a memory of like my parents drinking sake when we went to sushi restaurants. So that would be like once a month. It was just not a big thing. So it wasn't a big thing within my relationship. To be honest, I had a friend who's been sober for the last 8 months, and I keep forgetting she's sober because I don't notice whether she drinks or not. Yeah. It's just not something I pay attention to. And I feel very lucky to have that relationship. But I think it's largely guided by how I was brought up.
Yeah.
Other part of dating with alcohol that I always found really difficult, especially in my 20s, is that if you are a woman drinking wine and they are drinking beer, the alcohol content is so much higher. I don't know. There was something slippery around that, and I didn't like it. And that's why I started putting this 2-drink limit in, because I actually found that people took advantage of that.
And I used to drink spirits mainly, so there's even higher alcohol content. But yeah, there is such a discrepancy with it as well.
And I noticed on the last date I went on, basically it was 2 hours before, like our first drink was 2 hours. Yeah. And I wasn't sure he wanted a second drink. It was probably the first time in a while I wasn't sure if he was actually enjoying himself.
What signs was he giving that he wasn't enjoying
that he wasn't asking for another? He had an empty drink for about an hour and a half, and I was still sipping at mine. I'm a slow drinker and I'm a slow eater.
Yeah.
And so I then went, "Oh, would you like another drink?" And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And then I made a joke later of like, I didn't actually know whether you were still interested until you said yes to the second drink. Went to the bar, got us a drink, and then he was like, "Oh no, it's because you're such a slow drinker. You took 2 hours to finish one glass of wine." And I was like, "Oh yeah, but I'm quite take it or leave it with alcohol. So like, it's not my priority, and I'm a big talker. So that's just the way I am." But now I kind of think maybe that's something I've learned to slow down how much I'm drinking so that I'm not drinking the same quantity they are. Because otherwise it was leading to decisions that I never regretted anything the next morning. I just wasn't sure I was actually my most accurate version of myself. Like I was a lot ditzier, and it was just because like that's my alcohol personality. But actually I'm not that. I am ditzy as a person, but it's like amplified. Everything's exaggerated.
Would you find as well, because what I used to find is I thought everyone was the one when I was drinking. So I would be like going home and I'd be like, oh my God, I loved them. They were so great. And then I'd see them sober and I'd be like, we have nothing in common. What was I thinking?
And would you remember a lot of the date the next morning?
Not a lot. And I think that's why I was like, oh, I love them. I would go home and I'd be like, they are the one.
It's also the fact that when we talk about problematic relationships with alcohol, we often talk about the quantity people drink. When actually, one of the conversations I had with someone who I was dating where I was like, I believe it's much more about how you use alcohol. So again, trying to aspire to, which sounds really arrogant because I said it's my mentality, but like this take it or leave it. Where actually, if you ever feel like you need alcohol, that's when I think personally you should just experiment with less alcohol. Because you should never need something to either be more sociable or feel more comfortable in a scenario. What advice do you give to people who might be socially anxious? Use it more as a crutch. Again, it's not always about the quantity of alcohol, but maybe not knowing your limits when you do drink.
I mean, there's so much to unpack with that. So in terms of quantity, like scientifically, we are advised no more than 14 units per week. So
what does that actually mean though?
So that's the chief medical officer's guidance. So it depends on volume as well, because it's not like you can't just go, 3 units is 1 beer, because beers have different strengths. So you can work it out. There's a lot of like apps that can help you. But say roughly we're talking a bottle of wine is like 9 units. So the idea is that you're supposed to spread them also. You shouldn't drink all your 14 units in one day. And the reason that it's 14 is because there's what we call the J curve. So basically our alcohol harms kind of sit here, they rise slowly, and then at 14 they kind of go up quite quickly. So that's in terms of quantity. Then like you said, in terms of quality, I think you're spot on as well, because my main advice when people were like, I really want to keep alcohol in my life, but I want like a better relationship, I'm like, drink when you're happy and to enhance the situation.
That's one of my rules. Don't drink when you're sad.
Don't drink when you're sad. Don't drink when you're uncomfortable.
Don't drink when you're alone.
Stressed.
That's my other rule.
All of those ones, you are. See, you're so self-aware. You can be a sober curious coach, because those are like, you should be drinking to enhance the situation, not to like make it more bearable, essentially. So that I think is the first one. And then I think if you are someone who is drinking because you're anxious, you have to work on all the root cause things. I think the best way to change your relationship with alcohol is to understand why you use it and work on those things. So if you drink for confidence, why don't you work on your confidence? Why don't you speak to someone like you? Get more confidence, build that confidence back up. I think targeting the root cause of things is how alcohol becomes less of like the thing in your life as like a starting point.
When you become more conscious of it, practically, what's the first step?
Practically the first step. Do the questions how, what, where, why. Understand your relationship with alcohol. So like, why do I drink? Ask yourself that question. What are the main reasons that you are drinking? Who do I drink with? Are there, like, have you got an auntie that every time you see her is like, when you're having kids? And then you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to have a bottle of rosé. Like, who makes you want to drink more? Who do you think would be more supportive? And then, like, where as well? Are you drinking more because you're, like, at work? Are you drinking more every time you go to the football with your mates on a Saturday? Ask yourselves those questions, first of all, just to understand your relationship with alcohol. And then you can start working on it from there. But I think also there are incredible resources, tools, podcasts, books, like vlogs, everything that you could think of for supporting you. And I would also say find like-minded people, because if you're the only person in your friendship group that is thinking this way, you're going to feel isolated, you're going to feel lonely.
I think my tip would also be like set boundaries around it. Like if people keep making comments about your drinking, like you actually can be like, stop. Why are you commenting on that? And same with my friend who's like going on this teetotal journey, is that what you call it? A sober journey. I was like, you can actually tell people that they can't comment on your drinking, or that you're not comfortable with it at least, and if they continue to do it, then you're going to leave the conversation. She was like, you just can't do that. And I was like, yes you can. You have to stop thinking of yourself as being the weird one. And I think that's where, like, growing up in Hong Kong, I wasn't the weird one for not drinking. In university I probably was the odd man out, but at that time no one noticed. So I think it's all a really interesting conversation. Turns out I've probably questioned it more than I've realised, but like it was all
you were so curious all along.
I was living it without actually realising I was. But I think that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, was because I was like, I've never had a conversation about alcohol bar the conversations I've had within relationships and how it's impacted dating, and especially when my friends have been going down that journey. But I also think, like, whatever your route is, whether you want it to be like a teetotal finite line where you decide to just, maybe it's your 2025 thing, it's a month you're trying it, or Lent, like I think all of those things are quite helpful, because actually, as much as it's very finite, it's actually a limited time frame to try something out and see how that benefits your life, or whether it works in your lifestyle, or when it was most challenging as well. Is there anything that you would like to add?
I just think if you are questioning your relationship with alcohol, like you said, give yourself a time. You don't have to put a big, especially if you're someone who, like you, is scared of labels. You don't have to label anything. Like, just explore it. Start experimenting with alcohol-free drinks. Maybe take a week off. Maybe say you're going to do one date this year that's sober. Start small. You don't have to worry about doing like big things. I think just experiment with it. And I think the reason as well you don't put so much emphasis on it is because you have such a full life of like your amazing career and all these things that you love doing. Make it less of a priority in your life by filling up your life with other things. So find other ways that you love having fun, find other ways that you can get rid of stress, go and meet friends more. Like, just make it less of the center of your life, I think, is the first sort of step.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We end every episode with something you're working on. So what are you working on? Is it a 2025 thing or just a general thing at the moment?
Just a general thing, but also 2025 thing. I'm working on saying no. I think no is a really hard word for me.
You know, a book called How to Say No.
Considering it's 2 letters, it's really hard for me. I think like last year I absolutely burned. Like, I know people use burnout a lot, and I have used it a lot previously.
People
but last year I got it
a lot. People burn out a lot because we have no work boundaries anymore, and our work lives on our phones that live in our pocket.
Yeah, it is so
and
true.
Sleeps by our head, by our beds. So like, but how are you starting to use the word no?
I'm starting to say no to opportunities, not like that come in and I don't think are necessarily like what I want to be doing at the moment.
Is it the fact that you don't want to be doing it and you say yes anyway, or you actually don't even ask yourself whether you want to do it? You just say yes if you're free.
I just say yes. I'm such a people pleaser.
But genuinely, it's good that you know the difference, because even just inserting the step of asking yourself, do I want to? Will be a fundamental change for you.
Yeah, which I've never normally do. It just comes in and I go, yeah, go on then, I'll do it.
Well, it's checking your diary, seeing if you're free, and it's an automatic
But that's the only thing I do. I check my diary, and if I'm free, I go, yeah, okay. Like, I don't think about the step between.
You know what? I spoke about it earlier on another episode of a podcast, but the pivotal moment for me was getting an invite to go speak at Oxford University and realizing, no, I actually don't want to do that. That's something that like you should aspire to. That is something that would look impressive on Instagram, but there's no part of me that actually wants to go do that.
What did you reply?
I just
how
replied
did you
no.
say that? You just said no.
No, I said thank you so much for the invite. Unfortunately, I'm not available. I'm not. Just when I say I'm not available, it doesn't mean I'm not literally like there is not space in my calendar. It means I am not available because that is the job I don't want to do.
See, that's so interesting because I always think I have to go back with the truth. So in that scenario, I would go back because I worry that if I say I'm not available, they'll go, okay, well, we can make another date. Like I'm worried
you'll die at what I did last night.
No,
you know what I did last night? A man asked me for my social media on a dating app and I replied no.
No,
that was literally all I said.
Like, here you go. Do you want my bank details?
He replied, okay. We then did a FaceTime call. We're going on a date on Friday.
You still did a FaceTime call and you're going on a date?
Yeah,
oh
my God. 100%. But like, okay, so
people actually respect your boundaries. That's amazing.
100%. And also, if they don't, that's not a person I want to go on a date with.
Yeah, that's true.
But also, that was one of my New Year's resolutions one year, like 7 years ago at this point. It was, don't do anything you don't want to do. And if you don't want to do it, you're not allowed to justify it. So that's probably the second thing you should add to yours.
Okay.
Is that like, you do have to justify it if you're cancelling.
Yeah.
But saying no to something,
yeah,
you actually don't need to give a reason.
God, that is so wise. Okay.
That's your new challenge.
Yeah, right. I'm going to take that.
So
Can I ask you what you're doing though?
The thing I'm working on is more balance. So I am trying to actually make time every day. So for example, my way of doing it yesterday was I had a half an hour sound meditation class in the middle of my day, which is a thing that I like would never normally do because I'm like, I still feel weird guilt around the 9 to 5 and trying to work like a normal work day. But I'm like, why do I live a flexible life? I'm a freelancer. I have this privilege and I'm forcing myself into the structure of everyone else when I don't have to. And if that means I work half an hour later in the evening, or if that means I don't, then like, if the work gets done, the work gets done. But I somehow, even as a freelancer, have adopted that presenteeism mindset of I have to sit there from 9 till 6 no matter what. Yeah. And so that was actually a really big milestone yesterday. And then I wanted to work out afterwards. And I was like, no, you can't be gone for an hour and a half because a lunch break is only an hour long. And I was like,
you are me.
Who?
You are me. I do this.
Who is deciding this? I am the boss. If I want to take an hour and a half in my... And also, I ended up working till like 7:30 last night. Yeah. So I never normally finish at 6 usually anyway. Yeah. But I had somehow... I don't know where it came from. I don't know whether it's living with a guy who was working 9 to 5. And before that, I had a housemate who also worked 9 to 5 and like being around that energy. But I was like, who's arbitrarily set that you could only have an hour of your day off and like that my hour workout and my half an hour meditation was like too much fun for the day.
When you figure this out, you need to write a book on this. So
I know, it's just doing it. Like
it's so hard because even like today, we've got an event in the evening, so I'm working after this, but I still thought, I have to do 9 to 5. Even though I've got an event today, really, I should have just started at like 12. Yeah. Between the hours of 9 to 5, if I'm not working, I feel this guilt. Did you have a job like before you did creation?
So this is all from who I've lived with, I think.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
I think this is where sometimes we get stuck on personal growth of like, how do I have that mindset, both with the sober thing and also what I was just talking about of like, how do I get to that mindset? You actually need to do it first. And actually, I don't know why people are waiting for it to get easier before they've actually done anything that will make it easier. Like try going on a night out without drinking. Yeah. Try actually going to that sound bath and let all that guilt rise up and actually realize, oh wait, I survived it and I enjoyed it. I was also more focused when I came back to my desk. And also I came back to my desk an hour and a half later and was like, oh, I haven't eaten, so let's add an extra half an hour to this. And actually no one had a meltdown. Everything survived without me because my job is not important or urgent. And like I write books, I make podcasts and I make social media. Nothing is that important. I can take 2 hours out of my day and I can work later if I want to, but even if I don't, all good. Everyone will survive. I need to listen to this
over and over again.
And also, you should take the time you spend this evening and substitute that in your diary as time off.
Oh gosh, yeah. See, that seems scary, but I need to do that. Yeah, I need to.
If you're going to force yourself into this 9 to 5 structure, then you also get the structure of overtime.
Yeah. But it's like even me and a few friends work at a coffee shop together because they're self-employed. So sometimes on like a random Wednesday, we'll be like, oh, should we work together? I feel guilty when I'm there. I feel like I should be at home shackled to my desk. So
there's appropriate and inappropriate guilt. Yeah. Guilt is for when you're doing something wrong. Yeah. You're not doing something wrong. And I think it's unlearning your relationship with productivity and your association with your self-worth with productivity. That would probably be the next step I would do for you. But your first step is actually then work within the parameters of overtime. That you get those hours back free in your diary. It'll be part of your no.
Yeah, I was going to say I've got a lot more to work on than just no, I think.
I gave you homework as your not as your life coach.
Love it.
Thank you so much for coming on the episode. And how can people find you?
Instagram is normally the best place. So at Millie Gooch and at Sober Girl Society.
Thank you so much for coming on. I had the best chat with you.
Oh, me too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, leave us a review and we'll be back next Tuesday with a brand new episode.